Everyone, and welcome to our August Advisory Council meeting for Bear Hefty. A couple things to start out. The primary egress for those here at the meeting through the double doors there, and then down the hall and out the front of the building. The secondary would be through the back right here behind me and down the hall heading north, and then you could exit at the end. Restrooms are through the double doors and then to the right over by the stairs. What else? For those that are on the teleconference line, please mute your, if you're not speaking, please mute your phones so we can avoid some of the noise, background noise. Next, we'll do a roll call of the council. Do you want to start on this end over here, Tony?
Sure. Hi. Antoinette Stein, Environmental Health Trust, Public.
Don Lucas, Public.
Michael Lipset, Public.
Judy Levin, Public.
Pascal Beniamini, Drinker Bill and Wreath, Public.
Sharon Bradley, Home Furnishings Association.
Good morning, Steve Whiteycamp, California Moving and Storage Association.
Good morning, Chris Higdon, California Moving Systems.
And then myself and Bureau Chief, Nicholas Oliver, and
Rita Wong, Deputy Chief, Bear Hefty.
thank you all. All right, so future meetings, we have November 29th here at Headquarters 2, DCA HQ 2. Same room, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that is scheduled, so does that work for everyone? Yeah, okay, great. Okay, any items from the March meeting that anyone would like to discuss? No? Anyone in the audience? Okay. We will move on to our statistical overview, and we'll begin with our licensing categories, which will be done by one of our licensing analysts. If you could introduce yourself when you come up, please.
Hi, I'm Michelle Linton-Shed, licensing analyst. I'm going to be covering agenda item 2A. So I'll be going over the licensing statistics if you want to refer to page 4 of the handouts. We've included 4 years of statistics. Regarding the year registrations, we have seen an increase in appliance service dealers and continue to see an increase in service contract sellers, upwards of 1,700 more licenses than compared to last year. There is a slight decrease in both the electronic service dealer and the combination electronic and appliance service dealer licenses. Oh, sorry about that. And then on the home furnishing side, we've seen an increase in the furniture retailers, bedding retailers, and importer licenses, which includes overseas manufacturers. All other license types have pretty much stayed the same. Are there any questions?
Yeah, it's really hard to hear you though.
So you may need to increase the volume on your side.
Well, I've already done that several times, but I don't even hear.
Is anyone else having a hard time hearing?
can do it, just have you sit it down
Okay.
and then maybe.
Okay, well, I'm finished, so, yeah. Is there any questions, anyone? No? Okay. All right.
No, this is Michael Lipset. I don't have a question, but I just want to request that for the next and for all advisory committee meetings, that we receive the packet ahead of time, because all of us, I think, are seeing this for the first time this morning, which does not give us a chance to review anything in writing or think about it before responding to the presentations here. So I'd like to request that in the future we receive it at least a week before each meeting. And I see everybody nodding their heads, so thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I apologize for that. We were waiting for a few things that were sort of out of our control. And for anyone on the teleconference or the webcast that would like a materials packet emailed to you, you can call over to our headquarters right now, area code 916-999-2041. Johnny Santos will send you over, we'll just email you the packet. Thank you, Michael, for that comment. Okay, if there's no comments on the licensing, then we will move on to consumer complaints.
Good morning, Chief. Good morning, Deputy Chief, and members of the Barafti Advisory Council. My name is Shalom Rojas Cardenas, and I'm here, I work for the enforcement. Okay, sorry. Put it in my face.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
My name is Shalom Rojas Cardenas, and I work in the enforcement unit at the Bureau. And a little bit nervous, this is my first time. Today I will be providing a brief overview of the statistics from the Enforcement Investigations Unit. And so the statistics consist of, let me see, there's been one case forwarded to the Attorney General's office for the fiscal year of 2017-2018, and one case currently pending. There are currently 4 licensees on probation. The number of citations issued for 2017-18 for Bear would be 550. For Bufty would be 305, with a total of 855. The number of telephone disconnects ordered for the fiscal year, Bear would be 48, Bufty would be 17, for a total of 65. Consumer complaints, and they would be consumer complaints, non-household movers. Bear would be 1,019, Bufty would be 288, for a total of 1,307. The number of consumer complaints closed for Bear is 1,014, for Bufty is 281. The total is 1,295. Internal cases, investigations for Bear opened is 6. I'm sorry, did somebody have a question? Oh, okay. So internal cases for Bear is 624. For Bufty is 355, for a total, excuse me, of 979. Total number internal cases closed is 705 for Bear. For Bufty would be 388, for a total of 1,093. And now we'll go into the statistics for the home movers stats from July 1st to July, actually we did a second evaluation, and the total is going through August 1st. The total as of yesterday was, it looked like 55, and so 11 of those are interstate moves, overcharges, or unlicensed. 7 hold hostage complaints, 7 loss or damage to household goods, 5 miscellaneous, 3 refunds, 3 complaints regarding unlicensed activity, 3 complaints pending analysis, 1 overcharge and damage, 1 restoration, and 1 refusal to file a claim. They don't quite add up those numbers to 55, but we got the overall number yesterday, which was about 55. So if you have any questions? No? No questions? Oh.
Hi, Antoinette Stein. The question I have is on the complaints. Is there any categorization whereby the complaints fall into overlap, like they're complaining about the same thing? Or would you say that usually they're very specific and circumstantial? Or is it unanalyzed at this point?
Well, the number of complaints could come from, they usually come in from the phone, from via telephone or the email, and they range anywhere from, furniture and electronics, that kind of thing. I'm not too sure if that answered your question.
Somewhat, yeah.
Can you just repeat your question?
I'm just wondering if there's been any repeat, where you have 500 complaints or 1,000 complaints, that there's overlap, they're all complaining about the same thing that then could be addressed through some policy or some factor? Or is it very individual and circumstantial on their case?
To me, I work in the enforcement unit, and there's different staff members that work with different, they have different duties, and I believe they're all individual cases, and so I couldn't say they're all for one targeted area, so that's what I would think, but I'm not too sure. Yeah, you may want to answer.
I mean, I think most of the complaints we receive, yeah, I'd say the majority are unlicensed activity, just in general, right?
And it varies. It could be service contract issues. It could be,
Right.
it could go anywhere to the product quality of the furniture that you buy, so, yeah.
Yeah, unlicensed is the majority, though,
Right.
absolutely.
Thank you.
I have a question. Can you tell us on the cases that were forwarded to the Attorney General's office and the case pending, which part of the business was that Bear? Was it Buffy?
On the statistics that I was provided, it doesn't say, but I can tell you that the majority of the cases that go to the Attorney General's office are for applicants who apply for a license and they've been denied due to criminal history. They're forwarded, once they request the hearing, they're forwarded to the Attorney General's, and so it's probably for that reason.
It is for them, yeah.
Thank you. On the home mover complaint issue, I greatly appreciate the breakdown, and I would request that at future meetings that the count and breakdown be added to the materials.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Shalom.
You're welcome.
Okay, next we have the laboratory testing statistics given by Sue.
Hi, good morning. I'm Sue Shu, testing laboratory engineer. I'm here to represent our lab stats. During the fiscal year 2017 to 2018, our lab has received a total of 137 furniture samples, which are subjected to TB117 2013 furniture flammability test. Among the finished samples, 95% of samples passed the flammability test, and 5% of samples failed the test. We also received 69 mattresses for 16 CFR 1633 full-scale flammability test. Among the completed samples, 84% of them passed the test and 16% failed the test. The lab received 13 chairs for TB133 test, which is an open flame flammability test for seating furniture for public occupancies. All of the samples passed the TB133 test. Also, during the fiscal year, we received a total of 39 thermal insulation samples. 79% of the completed samples passed the test and 21% failed. We received a total of 27 bedding items, which were not subjected to flammability tests, so that's why you see the 0 in that percentage. And among all the labels which were reviewed by us, 34 samples equals to 18% of samples passed the label reviews. 82% completed samples failed the label reviews. Could be from any like a font discrepancy and also missing information, key information. So during the fiscal year, we also checked AFR chemical labels on TB117 2013 furniture item. A total of 109 samples stated no added AFR chemicals, which consists of 84% of the total completed samples. About 16% of furniture indicated that it contains added AFR chemicals. We sent 40 letters to manufacturers to request additional documents, proof of no AFR chemicals in furniture. At the same time, 40 samples were sent to Department of Toxic Substance Control for testing. Available results provided by DTSC showed that 34 out of 40 samples passed the AFR analysis and contained no added AFR chemical. 3 samples contained added AFR chemicals. We also checked AFR documents submitted from manufacturers. Among the 40 manufacturers, 34, about 85% of those manufacturers met our document requirements, and 15 did not satisfy the document requirements. So that's, any questions?
Yeah, this is Judy Levin. So you said there were 40 tests, 34 were no, 3 were no, or 34 confirmed no flame retardants, 3 actually had flame retardants. That leaves 3 samples unaccounted for. Can you say about the other 3?
Oh, another 3 is still during the test, and the end of the paper is testing program for the 3 components, so we haven't received the result yet.
Good morning. Do you have a breakdown of whether or not the items received were from manufacturers or importers, and that difference?
No, we don't have a specific breakdown for importers or the American furniture, American manufacturers, right? Is that your question?
Right, so you have manufacturers in the U.S., in California, versus importing from overseas and importing from out of state. That sort of breakdown.
Oh, I don't have that breakdown at this time.
Okay. Is it possible to obtain that?
I'm not sure that we have a breakdown of that. However, I will say that it's varied equally, really. I think in the past there has been, I think a lot of the samples were obtained from retailers, where I kind of have more focused on the distribution centers, the large distribution centers. So, I would say it's equal across the board. I can look into that, though, and see if we can get a breakdown for you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
May I ask a question, please? This is Neil Cohen. I was wondering, on the 40 samples, you indicated, I just want to confirm, those were from 40, each one was from a different manufacturer. Is that correct?
And that's correct.
Thank you.
Don Lucas, I just want to make a comment because I talked with Dr. Heather Stapleton from Duke University, and she'd been testing mattress foam and found in a significant fraction, I think it was about 30%, that there were added FR chemicals even though they're not needed in that. And the foam industry didn't realize this was happening, and they didn't know where it was coming from, whether it was from the barrier or the fabrics or whether it was imported foam or not. So I think it's not just related to the furniture foam, but the entire industry. There's lots of questions of what's going on and where they're getting the material from. So it might be a challenge to figure out exactly where all the materials in a piece of furniture are coming from.
Antoinette Stein again. Was there any enforcement on those that failed?
Sure. We forward the failed case to our enforcement unit. They will take care from there.
So yeah, there were, on the failed samples, there were citations issued, and
Are those citations publicly available?
On our website,
That's a
if it's
good
the
question.
case already been settled down, yes.
if it's been settled,
Yeah,
but
finalized, then that will be available on our website. But sometimes it takes a time, so even we submitted the documents and they need time to process it and work with the manufacturers and the retailers that may not be immediately, these 40 samples will be there.
that's correct.
Okay, I have a few questions and comments. One is just following up on what Don said. I think that a lot of us in this field had thought because the flame retardants would not be sufficient to meet the mattress flammability standards and that they would not be used, that this is kind of surprising what Heather has found. And so I was going to ask whether the Bureau can, like when you get bedding tests in the future, is it possible to be looking for, not just to do flammability, but to be looking at flame retardants as well? Even though it's not mandated, this would be something that would be, I think, of interest to consumers, and it may point out a need for additional money to do more testing of this kind of thing in the future in California. So that's comment number one. Then just with respect to the enforcement, could we have from you or from the enforcement people a follow-up at the next meeting about what happens with these citations? And what is the resolution other than the payment of a fine? Is there additional follow-up with the people, with the companies that have been found in violation? Are they rechecked the next time? Or is there to look for sort of patterns of problems with them? Then could you explain the fail rate on the labeling of the 82%? Maybe I missed that.
Yeah.
Could you explain what that consists of?
I think it's the labeling, when we review it, we have a lot of fine lines in our law to have like a font size, that's like how big the paper and what kind of material. So some of those are really just a violation of those. We will call it discrepancy, but we can't put it into the totally pass. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean they're really terribly misleading consumers. It's just that they didn't meet all the requirements in our book.
Of those, how many failed to check the box whether there was FR content or not? We've had that number before. I don't see it on this.
You mean the AFAR?
The labeling, yeah. So
So-
some of them failed because they failed to check any box at all.
Oh, actually, this year, everyone checked their box, so we don't have anyone missing that box.
On the label review, was that cumulative throughout the various tests, whether it be TB 117, TB 133, and other requirements, or were those samples for the label review only on one particular test?
This one, label review is like, it's a batting and TB 117, 2013, 1633 mattress testing. We don't review the label for TB 133 and the thermal insulation because they're not that much to review. And so other than that, yeah, this is the combination of everything.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I had one other question, or I guess it's a two-part question. Just with respect to the chemical, the analysis for flame retardants, you did a document review and the DTSC analysis of 40. These were the same 40, right,
Yes.
for each of them? And how do you select those?
It's random. So we usually have a certain percentage according to our budget, and then and of course, it's a sort of a target. It's like a foam, polyester batting. Probably it's less likely they have any FR. And also some shredded foam that's possibly is more chance for them to have FR inside. So we do have some material preference, but generally speaking, that's random select from different manufacturer.
So a follow-up to that, so I guess we set a budget in the contract, or the chief does.
Right.
In the past, it's been roughly 30,000 that went to that contract. So this year, I upped that, felt like it was, we need to do a little more testing. And we're also doing DTSC is also, they're doing a kind of a pre-test, XRF, which is much cheaper, so we'll be testing a lot more samples.
Great.
This fiscal year, and the budget went up to 40,000.
Great. Yeah, one of the reasons I was asking that was it's related to my earlier question about following up on violators, whether you would retest like specific brands or companies rather than having to be completely random each time, just to make sure that that people have gotten the message. This is going to be a problem.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's like they have a plan to recheck. Usually it's just like 1633. Sometimes we go back to recheck those manufacturers who failed the test. This is just because it takes so long and to finish it. So I'm pretty sure it's down the road we will have recheck them to see if they're the repeat violator.
Okay. And could I request like a follow-up on that at the next meeting?
Okay.
Thank you.
Antoinette Stein again. The XRF that DTSC can do, is it in laboratory, or is there any handhelds that can be explained to pre-screen things in the field?
It's in the laboratory. Yeah, they don't use, so they don't recommend using the handhelds. They're not as accurate. That's just what they say, and we contract with them. It's not, I mean, we really don't have a choice.
Yes.
But yeah, they do it in lab. And I believe it's in Berkeley lab.
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions? All right, thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Okay, on to 3B, actually 3A is the budget, and unfortunately our budget our budget analyst from DCA is out today, and they're actually going through, we spoke about it at the last meeting, going through a big change in the budget reporting process. And it's a new, I guess, a software program or database that they're using. Do you know what it's called? Do you remember the name? No? So we haven't had a lot of, I guess, updates, except the very positive update that we will, in all of our funds, well, Barham and Buffy, we did not overspend, and we are getting a reversion on both funds this year. So, and then of course, our home movers, it was transferred over on the 2nd, July 2nd. And with the amount of, licensing that we're seeing so far, and also complaints and enforcement, I imagine that budget will be healthy as well. I mean, it looks good so far, so. Next item, personnel, 3B, and that will be given by Diana Godinez.
We seem to have a truncated agenda, as it goes from 2B to 3D. There's no 3ABC in that agenda.
They're in our packets.
You have it right?
It's here. I
Here's
think
page
he's
10.
talking about the actual,
On the agenda.
the actual.
Oh.
Inside the.
Yeah, there aren't materials for those items. Those are just the speakers. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Diana Godinez, and I work in the policy unit, and we also serve as the human resources liaisons for the bureau.
We can't hear you on the phone.
I'm sorry, this is Diana Godinez. Can you hear me now?
Barely.
Sorry. I work in the personnel, or actually in the policy unit, and we serve as the human resources liaison for the bureau. Upon gaining jurisdiction over the household movers program July 1st, we gained authority over 11 positions. Between the 3 programs that we oversee, we now have a total of 58.9 authorized positions. Since the last council meeting, we have been able to bring on board several key staff within all 3 programs, which consist of our deputy bureau chief, a staff services manager to oversee the administrative and compliance units, a supervising special investigator to oversee the investigations unit, 4 special investigators, 3 analytical staff for the licensing unit and administrative unit. We are actively recruiting for a few of our vacancies that still remain or that have recently become vacant due to staff separating from state service. 2 of the vacancies that we will fill very soon include the special investigator position and a staff services analyst in the compliance unit. That's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you. And just to comment on that, most of you probably don't know that Saeed in the lab recently retired. He's been with the Bureau many years and has been instrumental in, I'm sure you've all worked with him for a long time. So he will be greatly missed by all of us, I think. Yeah.
Is Said planning to come back to work as a retired annuitant or not?
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah, he's finished. Yeah.
And is there a replacement found for him yet?
No, that was just, his last day was Friday.
Oh, goodness.
So we'll begin that recruitment process. Well, we already have, but, so maybe by next meeting, hopefully. Yeah. Okay. So outreach and consumer education. So we've done a lot of I guess, updating to a lot of our consumer education materials, pamphlets. They're they're on the back table for those that are here, and they're online on our website for those that are not present. I've been working closely with the Division of Communications, PR, and Marketing group at DCA to facilitate that. We've also, with the recent home movers transition, we've really done a lot there as well. A lot of outreach through social media, also to news outlets, Chronicle, all the big newspaper outlets. So that's been really good. Also our Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook has also been a lot busier the last, I would say, 3 months. We've seen a lot more follows. I think primarily associated with the home movers coming over and that whole media campaign that we did with them, with that. So it's been positive. For the future, we have an outreach committee that we have developed and in-house that will travel around the state and do outreach events, partnering with legislators, as well as, some of the things we've done in the past, which are the senior scam stopper meetings and those type of community events. So we do have a lot more outreach. We're making an effort, I would say. So, question?
Antoinette Stein. I wonder if it's possible, or if we could put it on our next agenda, to reach out to the emergency preparedness for the state with all the fires. Since we deal with fire and shock hazard, it would be good, especially with home movers, when we have the influx of people moving into new neighborhoods, et cetera. It would be great for them to have handouts as to evacuation procedures, especially for trucks, parking, all of the aspects of fire prevention, as well as fire evacuation methodologies and best practices, so that those that are new, as well as those that are doing work and service in the communities, are aware of the hazards that they're entering into. Thank you.
Great idea. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could piggyback on that as well, and I mentioned before that there's great opportunity for crossover of information to the public, because people are more focused during a process of transition in their home and electronics issues, furnishings, all those things. So as the electronic page for home movers becomes more robust, I would say, at least in somewhere on there, have links to all the related consumer outreach items, because those are times when people are looking at those other things and may, get that information more broadly dispersed to the public.
Great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. Any other comments? Okay. Last for the operations updates, item D, legislative update from EAFANA, from DCA.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Afana Lamar from the Department of Consumer Affairs Legislative Office. I'm your legislative analyst. First thing in the packet I want to go over is the legislative calendar. We're in the last month of the legislative session. This is when all the action happens. When the legislature comes back on Monday, it'll be all about fiscal bills and appropriations. This is a time where many bills are amended, heavily amended. The last, a couple dates I want to highlight: August 24th is the last day to amend a bill on the floor, and all bills must be passed by the legislature, both houses, on August 31st. The governor then has until September 30th to sign or veto all bills. If he takes no action on a bill, it automatically becomes law. So going into the bills, the first bill in your packet is AB 2110 by Assemblymember Eggman. This bill would have enacted the Right to Repair Act and would have required electronic equipment manufacturers to make replacement parts, service documents, and specialty tools required to fix an item available to third-party service dealers or owners for 5 years. It also would have appointed the Attorney General as the enforcement authority. This bill died and is no longer moving. Any questions on that bill? Nope. Okay, the next bill is AB 2998 by Assemblymember Bloom. Sure.
Yeah, so you say it died. What was the status? Where was it? What committee?
It was in the first House Policy Committee. It was never heard. And I never was able to find out why exactly it was pulled. I'm not sure if it was opposition or if there just wasn't enough votes. But yeah, it was just never heard.
Wow, okay, thank you.
Okay, AB 2998, this bill would define juvenile products and prohibit on or after January 1st the use of flame retardant chemicals at levels above 1,000 parts per million in those products, as well as mattresses and reupholstered furniture. This bill would require the Bureau to extend testing required by SB 1019 to those products. And this bill has been amended several times since we last met, so I'll quickly go over what those are. The bill was amended to add multiple authors, co-authors, Assemblymember Calra, Stone, Friedman, and Gonzalez-Fletcher. It was amended to rewrite the legislative intent. It's now more clear. There's more emphasis on current policy, which is actually based on studies versus talking about those studies. It adds exemptions for items not falling under the Bureau jurisdiction, such as consumer electronics. This bill only applies to furniture and, juvenile products, so that was made explicitly clear. Amendments specify the bill applies to new products only. That includes the sale of and use by custom upholsterers. That used products are not subject to the requirements of this bill. These amendments authorize the Bureau to issue fines to any manufacturer that produces a juvenile product or mattress that is found to contain flame retardants, and any seller that continues to sell the flame retardants after the Bureau posts notice of the test failure on its website. So consequently, this bill requires the Bureau to post those on its website. It also revises the definition of flame retardant. When the bill was first introduced, it referenced the definition in SB 1019. This bill would now have a different definition for these products. If you want to see what those are, it's lengthy, so it's on page 6 of the bill, of the version of the bill in your packet, if you wanted to see that. This bill is set for hearing in the Senate Committee on Appropriations on August 13th.
That's been canceled.
What?
That hearing is canceled.
Oh, it is? Oh, I haven't even heard that.
That it's going
Yeah.
directly to vote, as far as I know.
Where did you hear that? I'm just not
Yeah.
I
aware.
heard that.
Can't hear you.
Well, I heard that there was a meeting scheduled, an appropriations meeting scheduled, and then I was called yesterday and told that that hearing was canceled and that it was going directly to a floor vote. Can anybody confirm that?
I mean, we have one of the bill sponsors right here.
I have not heard that. We are having a meeting today at 3, and maybe I'll hear that, but I have not heard that to date.
Is there some way that we can be informed so that we know for sure? Because there were people that were planning to attend, and then we were told it was not happening. So it's still planned, as far as you know, for the 13th?
I thought it was the 16th, but I haven't heard that it's not happening.
It's the
Okay.
13th, I checked this morning before.
Yeah, I haven't heard that it's not happening.
There is going to be a hearing.
Well, we don't know, but.
According to
you've
what's
heard-
published.
From as far as I know, it's still happening.
Okay. Thank you.
I can double check and get back to
Me
you.
too. I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
Can you please restate that bill number?
That was AB 2998 by Assemblymember Bloom.
Excuse me, this is Pascal Beniamini. Obviously, industry is very concerned about this bill, but from a Bureau standpoint, if it does pass, what is the Bureau planning on doing in terms of enforcement and resources? Because this is a potentially very significant addition to compliance.
Well, the enforcement component is the withhold from sale. So that process will be worked out by the Bureau if this bill passes, but they are required to post items that fail on its website. And then the fiscal impact, which is public, the fiscal analysis is posted online. We asked for a special investigator to actually do the investigations and do the enforcement for this.
And is the Bureau prepared for that?
I would ask Chief Oliver.
I mean, I would say yes. We did identify, or DCA, working with DCA, identified what the Bureau would need to implement this, as far as enforcement goes, and as one special investigator with our existing, special investigators that we have, would be sufficient.
My understanding is, like for furniture, which is already labeled clearly, the enforcement would just be ensuring that the products that they contain flame retardants would just not be allowed. For children's products, you're already pulling children's products for other label checking, is that correct? And same with mattresses, yeah, okay.
Any other?
So what was the fiscal that you estimated for this?
I don't have it on me, but it's online. I can email
I
that to you.
can look online. I was just curious if you knew what it was, and it was really with just one investigator would suffice.
We also asked for SSA because this bill would require the Bureau to take complaints, process complaints, investigate complaints. So we would need a person to do that.
Okay, so it's two PY you've asked for?
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else?
We got an email from appropriations staff last night saying the bill was indeed moved to the 13th for a hearing in appropriations.
Do you have a time?
I don't, whatever the committee
Okay.
meetings, I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. Moving on to SB 840 by Senator Mitchell. This was a budget trailer bill attached to the Budget Act of 2018. This bill granted the Bureau spending authority to administer the household mover program and granted authority of $2,455,000. I didn't include the bill language in the packet because the bill is 200 and almost 50 pages long. And this part is just a paragraph in that, so.
Would you repeat the bill number, please?
SB 840. And that bill was signed and effective July 1st. Any questions? Okay. The last bill on the agenda is SB 1483 by Senator Hill. This is Bear Hefty's Sunset Review Bill. So this would set the next review as for the Bureau, it would be during 2020 or 2022, as if the Bureau were to expire on January 1, 2013. This bill has also seen a lot of action. The amendments that since the last meeting are, the bill now specifies that electronic and appliance repair licensees and custom upholsterers can issue work orders and invoices in an electronic format. It also requires service dealers who use electronic format to retain records for 3 years and custom upholsterers for 1 year. It redefines service contract to include all consumer goods except vehicles and defines consumer goods. That definition is any new or used product that is used, bought, or leased for use primarily for personal, family, or household devices, including assistive devices. So this bill, we're not sure how much it'll expand the Bureau's jurisdiction over service contracts, but we expect it to be considerable. Amendments would require service contractors to submit documents incorporated by reference when submitting to the Bureau for approval. If any language of the contract is changed, this bill would require service contract administrators to resubmit to the Bureau. And maybe the biggest thing, this isn't in bill language, but I've been given the go-ahead to discuss it. The name change for the Bureau is gaining traction. If it's put in, it would most likely be when it's heard in appropriations on August 8th. So this could be next week, or as soon as next week we could possibly hear. The name that's been thrown around the most is the Bureau of Household Goods and Services, but that hasn't been incorporated into the bill yet, so if you have any other ideas. BHGS. Can you think of a way to say that easily?
Well, if you put the "of" in there, it could be bogs.
There you go.
But that's, it's a big improvement, even with this, so.
Well, it wasn't my idea, but I'll pass that along. Any questions about the sunset bill? Okay, well, that's it. Last call. All right, good to see you guys.
Thank you. Okay, so now we will have a presentation of the cost-benefit analysis of the consumer protection through furniture fire barriers. So this is part of the barrier study. The barrier study, however, has not been publicly released yet, but will be soon. Of course, we would have preferred to release the barrier study prior to a presentation on the cost-benefit analysis, but that's just the way that it worked out this time. So that will be published, though, very, very soon to our website and sent out, on our listserv, and so you all will know when it's released. Okay. If you can introduce yourself when you come up.
Of course. Good morning, everyone. I'm Nathan Fessler. I'm a graduate student of the Public Policy Administration program here at Sac State. And today, Professor Wasmer is also in attendance. I'll be giving a 15-minute presentation on the benefit cost study that we completed of upholstered furniture using fire barriers. And given the amount of material that we need to cover today, I'd ask that we hold questions until the question and answer period afterward. And we can circle back to the various parts that you may have questions on. Next slide. All right, just a quick recap. The Bureau requires upholstered furniture intended for residential use in the state of California must meet Technical Bulletin 117, which is a smoldering performance standard designed primarily to protect upholstered furniture from the ignition against cigarettes. Now, what the Technical Bulletin 117 does not address, however, is the potential for ignition against open flame sources. So in 2014, the Bureau initially proposed an additional performance standard designed to address this. And it's designed to achieve a baseline resistance against ignition for open flame sources through the use of fire barriers and upholstered furniture. Now, fire barrier is typically composed of either a cloth or synthetic composite material placed between the foam and the cover fabric. Part of this proposal, the Bureau committed itself to evaluating this standard using benefit cost analysis. And so that would be the impetus for the study. So the main objective of the benefit cost analysis study that we wanted to answer was if we were to adopt this proposed fire barrier standard, what would be would the likely benefits from this to the California households, would that exceed the likely costs to the upholstered furniture manufacturers who were responsible for implementing the standard? So the importance of this benefit cost analysis when we're trying to answer this question are kind of twofold. First, it's an actual method that we can quantify the benefits and the cost of regulation. We compare that to one another. It's also extremely important when you're looking at benefits and costs. You have a way of comparing apples to apples, especially when regulation is dealing with deaths and injuries, which in the case upholstered furniture standards deal with. In order to do that, we need to have some sort of way of valuing deaths and injuries in a monetary dollar basis so we can compare that to the costs. The other reason why benefit cost analysis is important when we're evaluating regulation is widely adopted as an evidence-based approach. So you can see that in its extensive use in the economic literature, but also it's been widely adopted since the 1970s by the federal government agencies, including the Consumer Protection and Safety Commission. And they use benefit cost analysis to evaluate their consumer safety and consumer product standards. Two quick examples of this would be benefit cost analysis evaluating smoke detectors or fabric flammability standards. So I kind of already alluded to the primary question that we're seeking the answer, whether the benefits exceed the costs. And if we can show that under a reasonable range of sensitivity analyses, then we can say from the benefit cost standpoint, there's evidence for the adoption of the fire barrier performance standard. So the first step in our methodology was to figure out the fire scenarios that would be addressable by the fire barrier performance standard. And so we took what was in the existing literature and we applied that to derive two scenarios. The first fire scenario is residential building fires that are caused by upholstered furniture as the first item to ignite by an open flame source. Included in an additional scenario is where upholstered furniture is identified as the primary contributing fuel source to flame or fire spread that is not the first item to be ignited. And why that second scenario is included is the role that upholstered furniture plays in both the time to flash over a residential building fire, which would ultimately result in imminent death, or also the important role that it plays in time to egress, or the time to escape. And that's why we include that second scenario in the analysis. So from those two fire scenarios, we can define the benefits used in this study, which are the reduction in fire-caused civilian deaths, injuries, property, and content loss for each year that upholstered furniture with fire barriers remain in use. Whereas the expected costs, we defined it as the increase in the upholstered furniture manufacturer costs, either in the form of higher prices to the consumer or in the form of lower profits to the manufacturer, plus the increase in state enforcement and testing costs that would be needed if the standard was to be adopted. So based on how we define the benefits, and including those two fire scenarios, as you'll see in Table 1 is the fire losses to California by deaths, injuries, property, and content loss annually from 2010 to 2016. And you'll notice that the average of these fire losses across those 6 years is 0 civilian deaths, 2 injuries, and about 1 million combined in property and content loss. And that's a surprisingly low number when we first looked at this. So also included is you see that there's 8 civilian injuries that happened in 2011. Now, despite that, what's really driving this low average estimate of fire losses is the numerous years that are occurring both across the civilian injuries and deaths where no fire losses are being reported. And that's what really is driving the numbers. So to understand the impact that these low average estimated fire losses have on the magnitude of benefits, we provide in Table 2 a summary of some of the calculations used to derive the benefits in the analysis. So when we have an average of 0 civilian deaths, that's not ultimately included in this initial analysis. And because of that, as you can see, there's few losses that are occurring to all of California on average from 2010 to 2016, and that's reflected in the 1.6 million total losses to society. Now, that on itself is not actually the benefits that we can say that's attributed to the fire barrier performance standard. And that's because if you were to include fire barriers and upholstered furniture, it would not reasonably be expected to decrease all fire losses by 100%. So the Consumer Protection and Safety Commission, both in their research and their experience, when they looked at this issue, they published their own estimate, which they found on average, if you include upholstered furniture, fire barriers and upholstered furniture, 19% of the fire losses would be prevented. So when you factor that into the total losses to society, or all California households, the benefits would be $319,000. Now, to understand what that number means, that simply is saying that if all existing upholstered furniture in California, existing right now, which is not meeting this proposed standard, would be to instantly replaced with fire barriers, that would be the value that you would expect to instantaneously achieve. Now, of course, the model does not use this number directly. This is more of an intermediary calculation, and I'll go ahead later on in the presentation show you the full model and how we get to the annual benefits. So in Table 3, we have a summary of the cost calculations also used in the benefit cost analysis. And just like I demonstrated what the total societal benefits would have expected to be, we can also demonstrate the total costs.
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt. Could I ask that you go a little bit more slowly in going over this? And if it would be possible to highlight specific cells in this presentation that we should be looking at? It's a lot of data.
Okay.
And it's hard when you're, I mean, I know there's a lot for you to cover, but it'd be good to just highlight this more specifically. And I'm sorry, since we don't have a copy of this, we haven't seen it ahead of time, you're going to at least have to humor me, if not the other members of the committee. I mean, going a little bit more slowly about this, okay?
Of course.
Thank you.
I was trying to be sensitive to the time allotment we were given. Okay.
Well,
sure.
I'm with the chief's indulgence, I'm going to ask that you be given as much time as you need to do this, okay? Thank you.
All right, cool. So here in this Table 3, we'll go ahead and just cover the main categories. And so we have the data inputs, which covers the total manufacturing cost per chair and sofa. We also have the average dollar values, the lower bound and upper bound estimates. Now, in the paper, we demonstrate the outcomes evaluating those upper bound and lower bound estimates. But for this presentation, we're just going to focus in on the average. So when we're trying to derive the total societal cost that we'd expected if we were to adopt this fire barrier performance standard, one of the things we need to do is calculate what would be the average total upholstered furniture manufacturing costs on a per household basis. And so we're assuming the households would have 2 upholstered chairs and 1 upholstered sofa. And with that assumption, we would get that on average, per household would expect from this fire barrier standard to cost $70.12. That's per household. So the average number of California households from 2010 to 2016 is approximately $12.7 million. And that would be then driving the total cost for all California households based on the upholstered furniture manufacturing cost of $989 million, give or take. Now, of course, we also have to add in state enforcement and compliance testing costs, which we provide a range of estimates. And it's a fraction of 1% of the total cost. So altogether from that, we get the total cost before discounting of $989 million. And just like the benefit interpretation, this is basically saying if all existing upholstered furniture were replaced instantly, right, not over time, but just instantly, that would be the expected cost to all of California households. Again, the actual model takes a few more calculations to get that into annual, and I'll go ahead and demonstrate that on a later slide. So, getting some to initial results here, Table 4 presents the baseline initial results. And what these results use are the average benefits and the average costs over a 16-year time horizon with a 3% and a 7% discount rate. So to interpret this, the net present costs are the annual costs that are occurring, discounted each year over the 16-year time horizon. And the net present benefits are the same thing. It's the benefits occurring annually that are discounted each year over the 16-year time horizon. And net present value is simply the benefits minus the costs. So in this case, if the benefits are less than the cost, you're going to naturally get that negative number. And so both outcomes show, quite significantly so, that the costs would far outweigh the benefits. Under the baseline 0 civilian deaths, 2 injuries, and about $1 million, give or take, property loss. Now, this is just one initial result that we're going to present today. There is clearly a level of uncertainty, both in the fire loss data from CAL FIRE, the cost data itself, and the risk reduction probability we used of 19%. So to account for this, we need to do a range of sensitivity analyses so we can evaluate some of these changes that we make to the inputs and the model assumptions and see how that impacts the actual outcome. So to first address the uncertainty in the fire loss data, we want to establish an alternative fire loss baseline using alternative criteria for the data. And so we did this through the use of the other furniture category. We included that into the 2 fire scenarios that we had established. And so Table 5 shows these new losses, again, from 2010 to 2016. And the average increases to 2 civilian deaths, 8 civilian injuries, and about $5 million in combined property and content loss. So we can evaluate that change in the baseline fire loss data to the actual outcome of the net present value. And so that's what Table 6 presents. And it evaluates it over the same criteria, 16-year time horizon, using the average benefit and cost valuations and a 3% and 7% discount rate. And while the net present benefits increase a bit, but still the costs far outweigh those benefits. So we wanted to really test the underlying assumptions that we were making about the data, whether that be from the benefit side and the cost side. And so Table 7 presents those 2 outcomes. And so outcome 1A, what it does is that we go back to the alternative fire baseline. Instead of using the average, now we're going to use the worst case scenario, or the maximum value. So we take that maximum value, and then we increase it by 100%. So we're really testing the assumptions with much greater fire losses. And then in addition to that, we take the total upholstered furniture cost per household, that $78.12 figure, we decrease that by 50%. And then in addition to that, for outcome 1A, we take the risk reduction probability of 19%. And then let's just say, assume that it's a 51% instead. So that if we were to put fire barriers under that assumption, you would be requiring that you be preventing the fire losses 51% of the time. Alternatively, in outcome 2B, instead of changing the risk reduction probability, we evaluated it by a 32-year time horizon. So a much longer period we're evaluating this regulation. And in both outcomes, 1A and 1B, you can see that the benefits rise substantially and the costs fall substantially, but the costs are still far greater than the benefits. Next slide. Now, that is but one way of looking at this. We can also look at this from another perspective, a switching value perspective, which looks at if we hold everything else constant, if we change one variable at a time, how much of a magnitude of change that we require to get net present value greater than 0. And so here is actually the full model here. So we can kind of get into some of those details that we kind of abbreviated on originally. And I apologize, I'm not at the computer here, so I have kind of a hard time being able to manipulate this from here. I may at some point step over there and be able to touch the computer. So to give a quick breakdown of what you guys are looking at, the current way it's set up is that the assumption is 2 civilian deaths and 8 civilian injuries, and about that $5 million combined property and content loss. And you can see how the model is calculating the benefits. Now, if you go to the rows and columns where you see the years and the periods, you can see that the annual benefits to California under this fire loss is about $192,000 expected each year. And the total cost to California is about $61 million. And that's derived by using the product life cycle of upholstered furniture. And so then from that we can determine, on average, what we would expect the number of households to be entering the market and acquiring this furniture that has the fire barriers, right? And so then the present value cost to California and present value benefits to California is then noted in the far right and left columns. And that shows you the discounted costs and benefits annually. As you can see, the benefits are growing each year over the 16 years. And that's because the model takes into account that if you were to adopt and the law was to go into effect, the California households are not going to all immediately come out and purchase upholstered furniture. They're probably purchase upholstered furniture based on their individual need. And so you're going to have this staggering effect where households, after each year that the law is in effect, are going to be acquiring incrementally this upholstered furniture with the fire barriers and then obtain the benefits from that. And so finally, over the 16-year time horizon, we are assuming that all upholstered furniture in California would have finally been replaced, and that's why the benefits are growing over time. And so then in order to demonstrate the switching value concept, I'm going to have to step away, and if that's okay, and then touch the computer.
I think you can take that mic.
Okay, I can take this with me.
It's on the stand. You can take the stand.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, I want that, yeah. So as I mentioned before, the switching value is a concept of looking at what would the magnitude change in one variable holding others constant to evaluate how much a change that would need to get a net present value greater than 0, which is the benefits exceeding the costs. All right, yeah, I think that's a better way of looking at this. Okay. Yes, that's perfect. Sorry, no. All right, so this slide shows 0 civilian deaths and 2 civilian injuries, and as I've mentioned before, about 1 million in property content loss. So to demonstrate this concept, let's assume that the civilian deaths were 50. On average, we would expect 50 civilian deaths each year. What would be the resulting impact to the net present value calculation? And here up on the presentation, we can see that the benefits, though rise substantially, are still far less than the cost if we were to assume 50 civilian deaths were to occur on average each year. So we can evaluate this also looking at 80 civilian deaths. And again, the outcome remains unchanged. So it would take a total of 133 civilian deaths before we can obtain that present value greater than 0, which is finding the benefits exceeding the costs. Now, some might point out that the other fire losses in this assumption, but the injuries and the property content loss are unrealistically low. So we can also evaluate that. We set this back to 0. We can also look at evaluate that if we were to increase these other parameters here. So let's just assume that we have 28 injuries that were occurring from these upholstered furniture fires. And we can set this to about 4 million in property and about 1.2 million in content losses. So now we can also evaluate the impact of what's the change in the total number of civilian deaths now to obtain net present value greater than 0. And if we put 130 civilian deaths in, you can see that the benefits barely exceed the costs, even under these more favorable alternative fire loss assumptions. And just to put that number into context, the 130 civilian deaths we'd have to assume to get a net present value greater than 0, 133. I looked at the data this morning from CAL FIRE that we had requested. And if you take all of the fire losses that occurred from 2010 to 2016, you just require it to be upholstered furniture or the unknowns included, and we don't restrict the data by ignition. So we're including all the ignitions. 159 deaths occurred from 2010 to 2016, just using the sum, not even the average. That's including all the unknowns and all the other ignitions that would not be addressable by the fire barrier performance standard. So that's kind of to put in the context of we really were required to assume 130 civilian deaths. That is on par with all the deaths that are occurring over the 6 years. So with that, I'd like to offer some parting conclusions here, and then we can get into a question and answer period. So if we make reasonable changes to either the benefit inputs or the cost inputs or even the model assumption like the risk reduction probability, if we make those reasonable variations in that, all the outcomes which are extensively demonstrated in the paper, they all show that the benefits fail to exceed the costs. And because of this, from a benefit cost analysis perspective, just this perspective alone, we don't find any evidence for the adoption of the fire barrier performance standard. And with that, we'll go ahead and take questions.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Antoinette.
Thank you. Antoinette Stein. It's not so much a question, but it's more of a comment, is that in your analysis of the manufacturing costs, I didn't think that you're fully representing the true costs, or same with civilian injury costs. You're looking at the 2 deaths, for example, for the civilian death, civilian injuries, the number of. You're not counting the other impacts of, that are attributed to the materials that we're talking about. And so, for example, if there is a flame retardant in the materials that have the barrier or not have the barrier, that we're seeing other attributable costs in the population that isn't being accounted for in this somewhat quasi-life cycle look at costs and benefits. So, and on the manufacturing costs, for example, you're not including, well, what is the cost savings of not including those flame retardants in, you know, it's less expensive not to include materials that are chemicals that you have to buy and purchase to put into the manufacturing. That is not accounted for in this study. You know, I think your study is trying to unitize and put metrics to a very important issue, and I'm happy that you're doing the study. I just feel like those two things are somewhat biasing the look at it's not beneficial to do this. The other fact that, well, I'll wait for another comment till after other people have a chance.
I can respond to that if you don't mind. Sure. Okay. So we did look at the inclusion of the flame retardants. That was one of the initial decision points we needed to make when we first were assigned to do this study. And based on when we wrote this report, it was our understanding that the Bureau does not have a direct authority over the use of flame retardants. I defer you to Chief Oliver if that's the case. Right. And at the same time, the Bureau's performance standards are a performance standard. They don't dictate how manufacturers meet that standard. So we can't, the benefit cost analysis can only include things that can be directly attributable by the implementation of a five-area performance standard. So it's unknown to say whether the current occurrence of flame retardant chemicals in furniture would change up or down if we were to include five areas. It's not something that the Bureau has current authority over that, so we can't really include that. But also say that the five area costs that we looked at did not have flame retardant chemicals in them. So those are the costs that we're using. And another thing is, as far as our approach to quantifying the benefits and costs, this is the consensus approach in the economic and the federal agencies' approach to evaluating the benefits and costs. The Consumer Protection Safety Commission, we looked at that report extensively, and our model is modeled off of that. And that's their approach to the benefits and costs, and how you measure that is approximately the same approach we took. They had access to a little bit better and more defined data that they had to publish themselves. They had to do industry representative surveys to get a little bit better data. We were confined to use of public data. But as far as the approach of measuring the benefits and costs, both of our approaches are the same, and it's also consistent in the economic literature. And I'll go ahead and leave it at that. Yes.
Yeah, actually, could I just wanted to ask Tony a clarification. Are you asking, or are you commenting on the lack of inclusion of issues related to potential health effects of flame retardant exposures on people and the reduction of, okay. All right, because
yes, for those that aren't in the room, yes.
Yeah, okay, because I think it would be extremely difficult methodologically for them to do something like this, just given, like, say if people had wanted to do a cost-benefit analysis of using flame retardants in the 1970s, say like a PBDEs, there's virtually nothing known about the health effects, and now we know, that these are really, really extensive, and any kind of benefit cost analysis that would involve a risk assessment, obviously, as you know, would involve the state of the science at the time. And so that had something like this been done in the 1970s, it would have vastly underestimated the potential cost to people. And I think that since the use of flame retardants now is transitioning from halogenated to non-halogenated, we're sort of in a similar kind of state of knowledge about non-halogenated chemicals. We know that they're not good. They're probably for people's health. They're probably not as bad as the halogenated ones, but it would be really, really difficult methodologically, and it would, they would have had to have expanded their team to include toxicologists and epidemiologists, and I think that would have been beyond the scope of the budget. But
And just to add to that, just to talk about the complexity, it would also require that, flame retardant chemicals come from a variety of products that currently are in use. We would have to then take what would be the total flame retardant exposure and currently in California. We'd have to try to isolate that just to upholstered furniture. And then from that, we would then have to try to understand that if a fire barrier standard was to be put in place, what sort of impact, up or down, or no readable impact at all would occur. And then we'd try to have to evaluate what would be the benefit of reduction in these health costs that are occurring from flame retardants. And I know the Consumer Protection Safety Commission issued a finding of a non-finding report that basically said the science is currently mixed on what exactly are the quantifiable health benefits or the costs occurring from flame retardant chemicals. Those are just a variety of reasons why we just can't include that in the benefit cost analysis.
Thank you for the presentation. Too bad we didn't have an hour, but I'm looking forward to getting into more depth in the report. One of the things that I've been following is the uncertainty in the fire deaths and injuries, and there's a lot of different reporting agencies and a lot of controversy about how to report and what the real numbers are. So one of the things I'm wondering, would it be possible to get your Excel spreadsheet and plug in numbers like say from the NFPA, because they include different things and their estimates are quite different than your estimates. I think it'll still show that there'll be no cost benefit even with their numbers, but I think it's important to look at that because I'm sure some of the critics are going to be looking at the numbers very carefully and saying, maybe you should use these numbers. And I know that even the industry has been questioning not only the reporting, but the whole issue of reporting the number of deaths and injuries resulting from furniture fires.
Yeah, and I can just give you a quick sense of what we evaluated. The Excel document that I demonstrated, as far as we're aware of, that's going to be put on the Bureau's website, so you can download that. Oh, it's there currently? Yes, so after this, you can, when you get home or whatever, at work, you can play around with it. As far as the fire loss, obviously, yes, it's well understood in the industry that the fire loss data, from a practitioner standpoint, the people on the ground who are in these home fires evaluating it is extremely difficult, and there is a degree of uncertainty, a large degree of uncertainty. The NFPA, or the U.S. Fire Administration data, when you look at their publications, they're national data. I haven't been able to find any state-level publication, so we were the first to look at specifically what is the fire losses that would be looking at for the state of California. So one of the ways that we thought we would try to address this this uncertainty in fire losses is to really test it. That's why we took the worst-case scenario and increased that by 100%. Just to kind of give you a quick sense of what that actually is, we're assuming 10 civilian deaths and 28 civilian injuries, using the maximum case scenario and the worst case, increase it by 100%. And that's expected to occur on average annually. So if you're looking at the fire data, and some years it's less than 10 and some years it's above 10, you would come closely to the same results. And the 130 civilian death is something that you would find on national level data, and even including some of those really high figures, the benefits still exceed the cost. But yes, you can use other data sets and you can play around with it, and you can look at just exactly what kind of numbers you would need either on the cost side or the benefit side to obtain different results.
Antoinette, one more question.
Sorry, this is Andrew Locke from the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and I'm also just like to follow up on that last comment. One of our questions was looking at our national data, at least the way we look at it, we have something like 400 deaths attributed to upholstered furniture, and so just a comment, that was one of our questions, I guess, is that your estimate seems really low, distributed proportionately to the national estimates we use. So unfortunately, I haven't had time for our economists and statisticians to dig into this, but we plan to, and hope to follow up with you. Then I guess my question is, if we have questions about the analysis, do we follow up with the Bureau or the authors, or both?
I think you can follow up with the authors directly.
Sure.
Yeah, Professor Rasmus said sure, yeah.
I could just add that we wanted to make
Need
the
to get
study
to-
very transparent, right?
May need to
You wanna-
get to a microphone.
Oh, sure. I mean, the goal was to make the study as transparent as possible, all right? So that's why the use of this Excel spreadsheet that anybody can access. And, you know, if you want to put more cost savings in regard to the use of not using fire retardants or adding more deaths or adding more property loss, it's right there to be able to do it, right? You don't have to commission an entire study. You know, I teach benefit cost analysis. Nathan's one of my stronger students, as you can obviously see. He embraced this. He's using it as his master's thesis. It was a really great teaching tool. But the need just to be transparent, right, to put it out there. And oftentimes you see these benefit cost studies that, either, a consumer advocacy group or an industry group puts them out, and they don't really give you, a lot, they don't give you into the black box of what's going on. So we did not want to do that. We felt the Bureau would be best served by that. So it is all there. We have a 110-page report that you can look at that's posted. We've boiled it down to a 30-page paper that we're probably going to try to publish academically. And then we have this PowerPoint, and then we have the Excel spreadsheet. So please, I encourage you to take a look at it and play around with it. And we would, anytime in the future, if you have any questions, we will gladly be available to answer them or to come back for another presentation or meet with you individually. We're just policy geeks, so we enjoy doing something like this and learned a lot about it. So just wanted to add that.
All right, yeah, thank you, Professor Wassner. I reached out to you and got a copy of the Excel spreadsheet earlier. One maybe follow-up question. You mentioned a 110-page report. Where is that published? The only one I've seen is the 40 or so page report that's on the Bureau's website.
That's currently being posted now. We anticipate it to be posted probably by tomorrow.
Okay, great, thank you.
Antoinette Stein, it's, in this study, I assume that the barrier was on the surface of the furniture, but with the, keeping up with the times, now that furniture is becoming more and more electronic, where electric circuits are embedded in the furniture to move it, to adjust it, to change the height, et cetera. It would also be of interest to consider improvements if we had the data from NFPA, which we should highly recommend that more detailed on fires that are reported. The statistics reveal whether or not the furniture was an electric type furnishing, that the cause of fire was due to within rather than a cigarette or some other source outside, and that we then extend the analysis to consider improvements in barriers of the circuitry from the rest of the foam and the materials, if that would help.
I just found out today that Saeed is retiring, but yeah, I would certainly defer those questions to a fire engineer.
Yeah, and just for those that are interested in what I was saying, it then extends to the UL approval issues of best practices for the wiring within.
Sue, do you have a comment on that?
I would like to make sure I understand the question. So you're saying, basically, if you have a lot of electrical parts in the chair. Is that?
Yeah, that was my question. If the reported fire statistics on death or injuries are coming from furnishings that have that embedded electric circuitry.
Okay. We don't have a lot of the data on that. Definitely, we're going to look into that and pay more attention to that. That's kind of like a trend in recent years. And in the past, we haven't got a lot of reports related to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Yeah, this is Michael Lipset. I have a few comments about this, and I think this is. I think you guys did a really nice job on this. It's a very complicated area, and I know you started from not having a strong background in this whole issue about fire safety and whatever, and I think you've really done an excellent job. The results couldn't be more clear-cut. And I would be very interested in your interactions with the CPSC staff on this too, because the 400 deaths a year that Dr. Locke was talking about, these are if you look at the raw NFIRS data, they're nowhere near that. This is the Consumer Product Safety Commission upweights these by their annual fire data. This questionnaire that doesn't deal specifically with upholstered furniture, but with fires throughout the states. I think it would be really interesting to apply this model to national data as well. But anyhow, I wanted to commend you for what I think is really an excellent job.
Yeah, thank you. That is a good point, though. The way that the U.S. Fire Administration or the FPA calculate the results, they do use a weighting scheme to try to account for some of the sampling error, because they can't. It's a voluntary basis this is reporting, so not every fireplace is reporting their fire losses to this national database. And unfortunately, that weighting scheme is not mathematically developed to be applied at a state level. Right, and so we were unable to apply that methodology. I mean, there are similarities between our two approaches, but there's also significant differences. And so we were using the raw data in this circumstance. I mean, alternative method too, if someone wanted to play around with it, you could do a population weight of the national level data. Though I do have a little bit of concern with that approach, because you would need to demonstrate, at least from a causal standpoint, that upholstered furnitures are a factor purely of the density of population. And I'm unsure if that's would be truly the case. But that's just an alternative approach. We saw that in the actual published literature. One study did do a population weight to try to get at a state-level answer.
And this is Judy Levin. I also appreciate the study tremendously. Thank you so much. I also think one of the assumptions is that a barrier would prevent these fire deaths. And actually, that may not be true. In cases of arson, for example, fire barriers will make absolutely no difference. And in many cases, if the person is passed out, unconscious, again, these kinds of deaths would not be prevented by a fire barrier. So by even estimating as many as you have, you can't assume all those deaths would be prevented, because they wouldn't be.
And we did exclude those in the analysis. We excluded things like arson and intentional. Yeah.
I just have one quick comment, because there's a lot of numbers getting thrown around. I caution you to make sure you clarify when you're talking about national numbers versus California numbers, because a lot of the numbers are reported nationally. You know, it's like on your last one, the annual life saved has to be 133. That's in California, not national.
Correct.
Yeah, I heard one fire scientist say the biggest cause of fire deaths is drunk men. And if we could get rid of alcohol in men, we would solve the problem, but that's not going to happen. But I did love that comment. And I think, certainly people passed out on furniture is a reality, and those deaths are unavoidable.
No comment.
I'm just quoting the source.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's move to item 5, which is the update on the reg change proposal for TB 133.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Donald Watts, Licensing Unit. Last Advisory Council meeting, we spoke on the proposed changes to our flammability regulations. This is on page 48 in your materials package. We did discuss earlier a timeline. Unfortunately, our review process did take longer, and so we have had to amend that timeline. Currently, the changes have been filed with the Office of Administrative Law, and an initial statement and negative declaration has also been filed with the Office of Planning and Research in compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act. Public review period for both of these is currently ongoing. Comments can be submitted to the Bureau by writing, fax, or email. And all comments must be received no later than close of business September 17th, which will be the end of the hearing period. The public hearing will be held the morning of September 17th at 9 o'clock. It'll be here in this room. In the interest of accessibility to the public, this hearing will be teleconferenced and webcasted. Once the comment period is over, we will start the drafting of the final statement of reasons. How long that is going to take is going to depend on how many comments we have to respond to. If there's more comments we have to respond to, then we're going to have to spend a little bit more time working on our final statement of reasons. We are going to be working actively on that as the comments do come in to categorize them and work on our responses to them, but it will ultimately come down to there's going to be some time left over if we have an excessive amounts of comments. If we can complete the final statement of reasons, get it reviewed, and into the Office of Administrative Law by November 30th, then these changes will become effective January 1st. If we miss the November 30th deadline, then it will become effective on the next quarter in April 1st. Any questions?
Thank you, Donald. Okay, item number 6, household movers, update from Jacqueline.
Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Castro, and I've been asked to provide an overview of licensing for the Household Movers Program. In preparation for the adoption of the Household Movers Program, staff from the Bureau traveled to the California Public Utilities Commission office in San Francisco and received training. As of July 1st, the Bureau has had the Household Movers Act laws, rules, and regulations booklet available online. We've received approximately 15 to 20 new applications and issued 15 household mover permits. In addition, the max rate Tariff 4 and Distance Table 8 are now available online and are free of charge to all household mover applicants and movers. We are in the process of altering all CPUC forms to reflect the Bureau's information. We will continue to use the Public Utility Commission's Household Movers exam for the time being. New test material is currently under development, and computer-based testing will be available by January 2019. As of today, 4 exam dates have been scheduled, 2 in Sacramento for 17 examinees, and 2 in Southern California for 34. I'll take questions now.
Hi, Jacqueline. So on those 15 approved, those were all in process with the CPUC prior to your taking over authority?
That is correct.
Okay. So you have 15 to 20 new applicants since you've taken over?
Yes, we have about 15 to 20 new applications that have been submitted to the Bureau directly.
And what state are most of those in?
So those currently are being reviewed by our office. We're currently reviewing them, processing payments with our cashiering department, and working with them closely to get required documentation so that the ultimate goal is to have them licensed as soon as possible.
Excellent. And we're very enthusiastic about the computerizing that exam process. We think that's a really good step. So we support that 100%.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Jacqueline, I have one
Yes.
question. Are you also licensing sub-haulers?
Yes, so sub-haulers, anyone that's doing local and statewide, and then also piano movers. Hi.
Hi, Antoinette Stein again. I know I mentioned the emergency preparedness overlap. On this issue, I wonder if there's any, or if we can encourage, I'm from Berkeley, Alameda County. There's a big effort on human trafficking to make awareness, and especially for movement throughout the state. If that could be at all extended to do outreach on knowledge of identification of the signs and symptoms of trafficking that can be identified, because movers can be good sources of identification information to enforce law enforcement.
I could address that. So on the interstate side, the most likely occurrence or the most likely opportunity to become aware of this would be at a truck stop, and those are occurrences that generally don't happen for local movers, people that work within a 100-mile radius. But for our interstate operators, the Truckers Against Trafficking is a group that we participate in, and we are aware of it. We need to do more, but it is something that's on our radar.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I'd like to add also on the home movers program, we've had a lot of complaints on interstate moves that have hold hostage situations. So when I say hostage situations, it's not people, it's their goods, just for those that may not know. So prior to our taking over the program, it was determined, there's a policy decision that the Public Utility Commission made that their primary enforcement focus would be on local and in-state moves only. So I think that has led to a lot of activity on for those interstate moves, these hostage situations where we see shell companies out there, moving companies, non-licensed, that have a storage facilities set up throughout the state. They come and move your goods, just store them, put them into the storage with no intention of delivering the items. You know, and some of these families are, military families, from all walks of life, and they move across the country. Obviously, they don't have access, and that's a very difficult situation, and we've heard a lot from them, and, obviously they're very emotional, and, it's hard. So with that, I made the policy decision in council with legal that we would deal with those situations, which we have been, and we've done multiple stings already, and come in and educated the company or the owner as far as how they can become licensed, provided all that information, but also worked with the homeowners to get their things back. So we can that they can find a licensed mover, or they can come themselves. We've had both situations so far. This is all in the last couple days. And they've come and we sort of just assist as far as being present to support them, and then they get their things back. So it's been really, it's been a challenge dealing with that we just had to, I couldn't see us as a consumer protection agency not helping our consumers in the state. So that will, as it has so far, take a lot of our time until we can really, I think until the industry, or not the industry, the unlicensed industry, till they get the point. We'll see how long it takes, but we're committed to making sure that doesn't happen anymore in California.
First, I want to congratulate you guys for stepping up like that. We've been asking the public utilities to do that for many, many years. They said it was a jurisdictional issue, and that shipments are tendered for interstate transportation, even though the fact they only go as far as Oakland or Richmond before they get warehoused and the hostage situation starts. And these are people that go online and they find what they think to be reputable movers, but are criminal enterprises with scam operations that identify themselves as legitimate carriers, and then they hold people's goods hostage. And these people, when everything you own is being withheld from you, you get smart pretty quick. So people have been able to find Bear Hifty. We say, it's going to be challenging for consumers to find Bear Hifty because of the name to complain, but boy, if you're holding everything I own hostage, I'm going to focus real quickly and figure out who the heck I can contact. So you have been inundated with those calls. They are seasonal, so you will see a drop-off after the summer. And my hope is if you can put some significant fines on a few of these carriers, and we can get the word out that this is not a ripe field for harvest, that there'll be less and less. And as we've always seen, there's very few California intra-state hostage, because there always was some enforcement within California. And there hasn't been on the interstate side. So congratulations to you. We'll be supportive in any way that we can, either finding people to service those jobs, referring people to you, all that. We're behind you on that.
That's great. Thank you for that. And on a side note, one of the companies that we received, several complaints on that were doing this holding hostage situation was a national ring, if you will. They had multiple business names. This is all public now. They just, the day after we assisted in the consumer getting their goods back, there was the U.S. Court, Southern Ohio District, filed charges against the owners. The company shut all of their locations down with the FBI and Department of Transportation. So, it's obviously, they've been operating for a long time, and they just, when someone finds out about them, they just change the name and continue rolling. So, so that was good that happened. So now it's in the Fed's hands, but we have other companies already that that we need to go assist with as well. So it's a challenge, and I think we're all up for it at the Bureau. We're excited about this change and taking over the Household Movers Program. And, see how,
Director Oliver, are you working with the federal motor carrier safety in terms of interstate moves? Because they could be working on one side of the fence while you're working on the other, and you might be able to gain efficiencies, especially on older cases.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just had a call with them, with their FMCSA representatives, and I don't know where they were from. Yeah, from DC, I guess, yesterday. So we will be looking at ways that we can partner with them, share information.
Steve and I both serve on the American Moving and Storage Association Board of Directors, and we regularly work with the regulators at the Federal Motor Carrier Safety.
Oh, okay.
So to help build the bridge, open communication, I'm sure we're more than willing to do whatever we can. In fact, we're going there next month for a march on the Capitol where we meet with these folks.
Okay. Thank you for that.
When my father passed away, I became victim to this in Florida. Moving his belongings, entire household, including artwork, was lost. What I was told is that I needed to go back into Florida to be able to file all the paperwork, et cetera. It became cumbersome and a nightmare, and it was all lost. So I really applaud you for what you're doing, and it's really important. I do want to say that the money orders that were requested from those people who took the goods, they were using Walmart as well as other centers where they would not be identified easily. So I just want to share that with you.
Yeah, we've actually, a lot of the complaints, and it seems like a lot of these issues originate from Florida. So I think Florida,
where the elderly live,
they
right.
do not have regulations for this industry, to my understanding. So there's a lot of the headquarters for these, criminal enterprises, really, is what they are. They are located there. Yeah. Actually, the ones that were just busted, that's where their headquarters was, is in Tampa, I believe. So, okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for coming. Any public comment on items not on the agenda by anyone on webcast, teleconference, or present? Okay. No? Yes? No? Okay. All right. We will adjourn then, and we will see you all in November. But of course, for the other meetings as well, I'm sure we'll see some of you for the public meeting for TB 133. So, thank you very much.